stop. Okay, we're starting out by me saying, oh, stop. But that's how we're going to go today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm really excited for this conversation today. By the way, you are listening to Judging Meghan with your host, Meghan Judge. I have never not said that in the beginning, Nancy, and here we go already. I am recovering. If you can't hear it in my voice, I was as sick as a dog last week. I was so, so sick. And my husband was happy about it because I had no voice. And maybe a few of my friends were happy about it too. And my children, I'm sure. But my voice is back and it's kind of raspy. But I missed you guys and I'm happy to be back this week. I'm going to introduce my guest in 1 second. But what I'm going to ask of each of you is if you are a new listener or you're a longtime listener, you've been listening for 5.5 years of me babbling. Thank you for listening. Do me a quick favor. I'm really bad about asking you to leave me reviews. Go to Apple if you're listening on Apple, pull up your app, leave me a quick review, Spotify, wherever you're listening. I really, really appreciate the reviews. Also, follow me on Judging Meghan, and I spell Meghan the right way, Meghan, Judging, Judging, Meghan. And send me your messages. I love when I hear from my listeners. There's nothing that makes me happier. I can take critiques. I would rather think that everything's perfect all the time. But if there's something I talk about and you want to talk to me about it and you're not happy, you don't call me, but message me over Instagram and I always answer. I promise you I always answer. So with that said, I am going to introduce my fabulous guest. I already can tell you we're going to hit it off. Nancy Howard Cobb is an author, a radio personality, fantastic lady that I already have bonded with before we even started. Her book is being re-released 25 years later. It's called In Lieu of Flowers, Conversations for the Living. Did I mess that up, Nancy?
Good job, Meghan. You nailed it.
Nancy told me before we started to record, because I got on here and I was on one of my speed walks and I didn't have time to do my hair. So I just threw it up in a little bit of a messy bun, if you will. And Nancy said, don't you want to write down the intro? And I was like, no, Nancy, that's not how I roll. I like to butcher an intro and then have my guest correct me. So welcome.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Meghan. So good to be here. I've listened to a variety of things you've done and just really proud of you for being in the front lines of what matters. So much of what you do has moved me. And I just listened to your three amigos, your South Bay gang talking about politics, which I totally loved. I did an interview with Katie Couric last week, and I started to veer off in politics because I feel very
No,
uncomfortable.
she's safe. She's safe because
She's
I follow
totally
her.
safe.
Oh,
She's
she's
totally
our
safe.
people. She's our people.
Well, we
Yes.
had such a good time and we laughed a lot, but we did get into politics, and it's and now I hope we can get through this without Iran bombing the
Thank you,
West
listeners.
Coast,
If you're
right?
listening, and again, Nancy, for many years, I did not ever get political because I didn't want to rub listeners the wrong way because I started this podcast to talk about mental health, to talk about grief, to talk about all the things that we're going to talk about today. But over the past year, I would say, to me, it's not about politics anymore. And I say that all the time. And listeners, you're listening anywhere in other countries or wherever you're listening, California, which is a blue state, and mainly, I mean, we're not for the majority. I mean, there are obviously MAGA and Trump supporters in California, but we're a blue state and we are being threatened, if you've been listening to the news or looking on Instagram, with being attacked by drones from Iran. So I don't know what to say. I think right now, more than ever, Nancy, I think that people that are listening are coming here because the news is so saturated with being monitored and you can't say what you want to say. And podcasts are a safe space because we can talk about the real things. And because we're going to be talking about grief today, this is a massive form of grief. Like I've said before, grief does not have to include losing another human being.
Exactly.
This is what
Grief,
we're in. So what are your
grief.
thoughts on that before we
Well, what
start?
I always say is grief has no fences, no boundaries, no walls. And right now, I think we are all, whatever our politics are, just as human beings, experiencing a kind of confusion, which
Mhm.
leads to grief, which has echoes from past grief. You have past grief, I have past grief. And when these things happen, I think we're triggered. I think it's so difficult what's going on in the world right now. And the images, when I wrote this book 25 years ago, it's what I talked to Katie Couric about. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have Instagram. We didn't have
Mm-mm.
any of this. And so now we're getting this instantaneous deluge of shadow and darkness, whether it's Ukraine or now Iran. And it's just it's a sad time. You know, you wake up in the morning with a little bit of a, oh God, what's going to happen today? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And so to my whole thing with doing this book is very female, I think. When I did it, you know, I really, one of my best friends died of breast cancer. She was an artist, fabulous artist. And actually, her twin, I'll hold this up. This is what the book looks like. But her twin sister is still alive. And she did the cover of the book of this new 25th anniversary edition. She's living in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Carol Anthony. And so it's and I have a 26-year-old editor now. I mean, all the people that I worked with at Random House are not here anymore. They've either died or changed. So 25 years is a long time in terms of culturally what's happened to all of us. And so
Mhm.
I'm having a whole new set of people, kids who are losing friends, who are losing parents. So I have a whole new audience. And you know, I feel so strongly when I had done this book originally, I was on the Oprah show and I lived in New York. I've just lived in California not too long, about 6 years since COVID. And I was on the Oprah show and I said, you know, I'm on a one woman campaign to get rid of this word closure.
Yeah.
It is, I mean, who wants closure? As I've said, you want continuity, you want continuation, you want a time to say one last thing, even if you got it right, even if you had time to say goodbye. You know, there's always regret. I always say grief, you know, grief's handmaiden is regret. And there's a, there's now a kind of collective vulnerability that I think is beginning to be a groundswell. I mean, I lived in New York during 9/11 and I
Yeah.
was next to the church where all the St. Ignatius Loyola was my neighbor and the windows were opening. I was working on the then new introduction for the paperback. And now I have another introduction for the paperback. But you know, you would look because you weren't looking at your phone walking down the street, which I don't do anyway, but you were looking in your neighbor's eyes and there was a sense of community, even though it was a community of grief and loss, you were connecting with your neighbors. And now we're not connecting. And I
No.
think some of these marches that you were talking about with your friends,
Mhm.
it's been so interesting to be in San Diego because it feels like after New York, it feels like kind of a big small town in a way, and it feels, you know, you can get a ticket for the opera at the last minute. That's a real bonus. And so I feel some hope in all of this despair because we're talking about this right now. We're having this conversation as two women from two different cohorts, two different time periods, and yet we get each other. And you've been so candid about your grief, and I think what happens is we have words like closure and passed away, and there's so many euphemisms because still grief is hard to talk about for people. And so the thing is, we're all born and we're all going to die. That's the fact. We're all terminal. And so, as you know, every cliche that you could slap on that like spaghetti is true. And so my whole thing was to open up about it. And I thought when I started writing this book, oh gosh, you know, my first book was called How They Met. And I interviewed people like who aren't here, like Carol and Walter Matthau. It was so much fun. Then people were asking me, well, what are you going to do next? I said, well, I'm going to do this book about death and grief and loss, thinking I would clear the room. And instead, people would come toward me because people don't talk about it, yet people want to talk about it.
People
So
do. People do. Yeah. And I don't want to interrupt you, but I have to, before I forget, because you touched on so many amazing and just like you had me at hello. I say that a lot to guests, but you really truly did do is what you said about, well, first of all, what you said about September 11th. Okay. And it struck me because I brought this up on the podcast before. I don't know. It's like what you're saying right now is really, really interesting because I've kind of been thinking this way too. I've been thinking, is the whole house burning down? Meaning everything's burning down to the ground. I was already dealing with, in life, you go through all these things and you're like, things can't be worse than this. And then, like you said, every day we wake up and it's like, oh, today California might be attacked by drones. Every day seems worse. That it's almost a bonding out of the misery,
right.
if that makes sense. And so, what you said about September 11th, just being in the city, I wasn't in the city, but I was young at the time. And I had just met my husband. We were just dating, okay? And we've been together 25 years. On March 21st will be our
Congrats.
25th anniversary of dating. And we met young. And I remember when the towers fell and I got into I had a Jeep Wrangler at the time. And I got in my Jeep and I drove to his place. And I remember thinking, is the sky going to fall? Are planes going to attack us? And then the next day, I've talked about this before, everyone was nice to each other. Do you remember this?
Totally.
I was in LA, so you were in New York. New York must have been even more special, but in LA, you would be at a stop sign and someone would go, no, you go. No, you go. Everyone would look each other in the eye, like you said, and say, hi, how are you?
Yeah.
It was almost like, because we are talking about loss and grief, and at a funeral, for example, when you're in such desperation of feeling the worst that you've ever felt and feeling like there's no way out of feeling this horrible, and then you look at someone and there's like a glimmer of love and hope. Do you get what I'm saying? So I had to interrupt you to say that because I almost feel like things are so bad and every day is worse. And every day I feel this, I look on Instagram and I feel so angry. And then somebody will message me something nice about something. And it's like weaving through this horrific time to get to the place where the good are going to rise to the top.
Well,
and I believe that.
So true what you're saying. And I think this anger, I tend to be pissed off all the time about what's going on.
Yeah, it's hard not to be.
This is not doing me any good. So, you try to transform the anger into some kind of action. I think you and I are both doing this grief work right now. And it's our service. And it's also, as women, I'm a grandmother now. And so I have not only my own children, but grandchildren. And I want the world to be better for them. So I tell them stories because I think we best learn from stories. So when I heard the story of your friend who died, your best friend, I had a best friend who died.
I know you said that. And I wanted to know, that was the other thing. Thank you for reminding me, and not to interrupt you, but is it her identical twin?
Her identical twin is alive and did the cover of this book.
So I know
so they were both friends.
Yeah, you get to see what she would age and look like. And you said that to me, and in my head I went, oh my gosh, like it brings tears to my eyes because you get to see her and how she would look.
Your friend was 36, right?
No, Julie was, and actually the anniversary is coming up, but her birth, she was 28. She was 28. And listeners, in case you haven't heard, I'm just really quickly, Julie was my very best friend, and she died giving birth. Not giving birth, but she got the strep, like mono infection. Her brain swelled. because the anesthesiologist didn't connect the tubes. It is
Oh,
such a rare thing. So when pregnant women, I try never to tell pregnant women this story, but they did a Dateline about it, and she she was Nancy. She was my whole world. So
oh, don't
I
blame.
know that you understand. It sounds to me like your best friend was, I say all
Well,
the
she's
time, Julie was my soulmate. She was
you,
my soulmate. Yeah.
there's a great book. I'm sure you've read Anne Lamott's work before. If you
Yeah.
haven't, yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
Operating Instructions was her first book,
Yeah.
and her best friend Pammy was dying of cancer, and
Uh-huh.
she's so funny and so she just tells the truth, and she just lays it out there. And one of the things that I was thinking about was that I wanted to know because there's a part of my book when I wrote this 25 years ago, people would go, that's a little woo woo. And I'd be doing book, stores and I'd have my black pantsuit on from New York. And I said, look,
Uh-huh.
I shave my legs. I don't wear Birkenstocks. I'm a New Yorker, but I'm going to tell you stories about red-tailed hawks and all these strange and miraculous signs that we never talk about. People will go, some guy who's real button dip guy, like a Wall Street guy, said, I know this is going to sound weird, but when my sister died, I was in the convertible and a bluebird landed on the seat where she always used to be. And I said, no, it's not crazy. Here's what's crazy. We don't talk about that. I mean, here's what's crazy that you and I started as a sperm and an egg, and this is what we got, and we can talk and think, and we both talk too much. I mean, my mother used to say, and you will appreciate this, 100% Irish. She used to say, interruption is the art of good conversation. So just, keep it up. And so I always say that to people because I'm constantly interrupting. But I did want to say the other day, my college roommate's brother, whom I was very close to, died. And there had been a pair of mourning doves in the backyard that I'd been watching. And I was sitting in the kitchen, the door was open, Kenny had died, and I heard this flapping, and suddenly there was a mourning dove. And if you look up mourning doves, that was a refrigerator. Anyway, you look up mourning doves and they are signs of spirit signs, as hawks are, as winged creatures are, but some people see hummingbirds. But I want to know if you had seen, what was your friend's name, Julie?
Julie. So I talk about, that's why the cover of my podcast is a butterfly. So mine is
Well,
a monarch. I talk all about signs. I always ask people on the podcast what their sign is. I'll ask you at the end what your
okay.
sign is for your best friend. No, I mean, God, I love you so much. I can't even, I wish I would have met you before because
Oh,
this is all I talk about. I talk about grief. I talk about loss. I talk about the fact that if you are grieving, which just so you know, Julie's dad was like my second dad because I had lost
nice.
I lost my sister at 2 and I lost my dad at 13. So,
Wow.
so when
Wow.
yeah, so that's part of why, I started talking about loss, and my listeners know I was diagnosed with complex PTSD because my sister died at 2, and I witnessed it. I
Oh,
witnessed the
honey.
paramedics coming in. So that's why all of this loss in in my own life got me to a point where I had a kind of a nervous breakdown in 2020, and then it was COVID, and I went through a friend breakup, blah blah blah. So that's why I talk about this and you talk about it because we want, like we talked about in the beginning, to help other people.
We
And that,
do. And we also,
yeah,
I wrote this book, I realized halfway through to make sense of my own grief, my
yeah,
parents' deaths. Then, my God, what trauma to have to see this 2 year old die in front of you. And you've had other things that you've talked about very candidly. But I think what the one thing I always say is grief not only cracks us open, but it grows us up. And the younger people are when they've had a grief, if it doesn't completely level them, is it makes them more empathic, it makes them more compassionate, it makes them understand how they're able to ask the hard question. And if you're afraid to say something to someone, just take their hand or bring them the cup of tea or bring them a glass of rosé, whatever it is that will connect you with that person. And again, to say, tell me, Julie's story. And you have to tell Julie's story again and again. It's just like Tatiana Schlossberg. I don't know if you heard that
Oh,
story,
of
but I
course I
mean,
have.
I
That
I woke
essay, that
I
essay, just so
just
listeners know, Tatiana Schlossberg, JFK, not JFK,
Carolyn
Caroline's
Kennedy's daughter.
daughter, actually that had died of the same kind of leukemia my dad died of.
Oh,
And
it was she
it's,
was gone, but she had just given birth to her second
yeah,
child, and her white
beautiful.
blood cell count was off. But she wrote, I would say to everyone, if you can find her essay, she wrote it a couple months before she
It
died,
was
and she was
beautiful.
35.
Yeah.
And I I woke up every morning thinking of her. I mean, when I read that, I just cried, and I thought more people have to hear this because what's going on in the world? There's so much ugliness and so much dark dialogue happening now that um, if any of those people who are spreading toxic stuff are confronted with this, say, the death of their wife, the death of their mother, the death of their child, if they're human beings, it's going to stop them in their tracks and they're going to think, what am I doing? I hope. If you're conscious at all, if you're not, then you're not conscious. I mean, there are a lot of unconscious people who are not good people. It's the classic bell curve. But I think by and large, human beings want to be good and want to be kind, but you got to figure out the suitcase you've been carrying around and what's in it and how it works and how it doesn't work for you. I told my daughter that. I said, listen, you've gotten things from your father, you've gotten things from me. Open the suitcase, see what works, jettison what doesn't, and grow up. Don't have this generational continuation and dirge of what was, because I do believe that we sit on the shoulders of some stuff we don't even understand on a it's like the only comparison I have for nursing my mother out of hospice. First hospice in America started in 1975, which is late. The symbol, of course, is a butterfly. And there are so many I have a chapter called Macaroni and Butterflies,
Uh-huh.
but because butterflies constantly figure around death and grief. And in Greek, psyche, the word psyche means two things, butterfly and soul. So there is a kind of symbolic gesture that happens as someone's dying, and even if they aren't speaking. And the only experience I've had akin to nursing my mother out of this world was giving birth to my daughter. And they're so connected. I did an essay for the New York Times called Last Communion, and it was this blessed event of being with my mother. And my father took his life with dementia. So when Leland, my daughter, was 6 weeks old. So it all fits together like an odd Rubik's Cube, But I wonder why. I mean, I was an actor and I did commercials and I, did TV and I did. But I will tell you, I did it for 5 years and I just kept thinking, it's all about if I'm always taller than somebody and they want me to be all American, not be funny, and I can be funny. So, it was just too limiting for me. But I ended up inadvertently doing this documentary film about a friend of mine, Hannah Lee Beck, who'd been a writer at Newsweek, and she was dying of the really serious repercussions of diabetes. She said, I lived too wild a life. I went to Paris and drank and smoked and had a blast. She was gorgeous, and she was a writer at Newsweek. Anyway, her story interested me so much, and her candor interested me so much. And I was living in a brownstone, and there was an independent videotape guy. That's what we were shooting on then. And he said, would Hannah Lee want to tell her story, do you think? I said, absolutely. So I ended up thinking I'm an actor who's doing this on the side.
Yeah.
By the time I finished, I thought, hey, I can hire and everybody gave their time. The post-production, I can be the interviewer. That's when I stopped acting, decided I want to hear other people's stories and be able to tell them. But I never thought I would tell my own story. It was always, I've done 300 radio interviews, a book of interviews. I love people's stories and I'm constantly asking questions, and I get really irritated at so many dinners when nobody asks questions. They go on
Yeah.
and do monologues. And you can always tell if who's curious and who's incurious. And by and large, the latter tends to fill up the table. Let's not go there right now because it's not what we're talking about. And I tend to go off on tangential riffs
No,
because
but
I'm,
you're not to interrupt, but you're right. There, it's listen. I've done episodes with a famous author about it's. I can't remember her book, but it's about the art of listening
yeah,
and how important listening is, and it's a skill, but it's also something that's part of why I do this because I love to meet people and hear their
yes,
stories. I love
yes.
meeting strangers. I
Me
think it's
too.
like
I'm
my
working on,
husband gets mad at me all the time because he's like, "You're nicer to strangers than you are to me," and I'm like, "Well, strangers aren't snoring at night." Just kidding, Ron.
I'm the same way. I have a project called I Always Talk to Strangers
No,
because
but
I
I
see,
love it. I'll talk
I,
to the valet. We'll go out to dinner and I'll talk to the waiter for 20 minutes before I order.
I
Like,
do the same
he gets
thing. You and
so mad
I,
at me, but
yeah,
I
you
love
and
it.
I.
I
I
think
know.
it's
Sometimes I
important.
hug the mailman. I mean, I am. It, 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 it's just who we are. We're extroverts, but we're very similar in what we do. And it's very
Yeah.
funny that he says that. But it's going to be a quick hit. It's not. You're not going to. He's not going to be telling you. The waiter's not going to be telling. But there's not. And it makes somebody's day to be kind. If I see a beautiful woman, I say you are gorgeous.
I do
But
it too. I just did
I.
it at Home
I,
Goods.
I
I just did it at Home Goods the other day. I think that's part of what we're supposed to be doing though.
It's a generosity of spirit. And
Yes.
you can, and then the person will look at you like, you're paying attention to me, you're listening, and you're saying that, and it's disarming, but it's also enlivening. And it does the same for the commenter as it does for the receiver of the comment. And then if you get into a conversation, everybody wants to be heard and seen. And so few people, ask the questions or comment or notice.
And you could make somebody's whole, you don't even know what someone's going through.
No,
So if you take the time to do something like that, you don't know what that person is feeling at that moment. I've been watching, I know we're going off on all kinds of tangents, but it's
that's all right.
because I
I know
feel
what you're
like
going to tell me you're
I
watching.
feel like we're souls that are supposed to meet and have
I,
a lot of weird stuff in common and very similar. Anyways, I'm going to say that. But I've been watching this show Shrinking. Have you watched it?
oh, I love it. Yeah.
It
Hmm.
is so unbelievably good. And I was watching, God, I don't want to give this away. I'm going to give it away and I don't want to. There's an episode with, I feel it. Okay.
Is
I'm
it
just
with
going to say,
Harrison Ford meeting?
no, it's the
Oh,
episode that just came out. And one of the actress that I love, she's so funny. She's the other therapist on the show.
yeah.
And she had a patient that took her own life. Did you
Hmm.
watch the last episode or
No,
am
I
I giving?
didn't. I did
Oh, well,
not.
I just basically ruined something for you. Sorry. But
You know what? Listen. It's stuff happens.
the point of my story is this girl, the character that's on the show was having issues with being so lonely. Her friend had passed away and she was so lonely that she felt hopeless because she didn't have anyone. And so the therapist was doing things with her, but this one day, the patient that they became friends called her and she was like, "Oh, I'm busy. I can't talk right now." And then the lady ended up taking her own life.
Oh my
The
God.
point of the story is you just never know what
What people are going through.
somebody's going through. And
Exactly.
so you never know if you stop and you talk to somebody in a parking lot and they might have just lost someone. They might be helping their mom through hospice
Yeah.
or their husband might have left them or they're just dealing with all of the shit that we're all dealing with in the United States. Unless you're supportive of what's happening, I don't really understand that, but most people aren't. Nobody I know except for a few are supportive of what's going on. And so we're all, like I talked about in the beginning, walking around kind of like we're zombies and not knowing that what to do right now and being like, are our kids going to get drafted into this war that nobody wanted to be in, or going to the gas station and it costs $6 this morning a gallon to fill my car? I mean, going off on tangents again, but It's so important. And then another thing that you said was, to go backwards, that I want to touch on is when we celebrate life and we celebrate birth, and you talk about, having your baby and how I went through the same thing. It was the best thing that I have ever
Me
gone
too.
through in my
Me too.
entire life, was meeting my two children. And I have never had that kind of love. I have never felt that much love in my entire life. And
It's very pure.
it's the most pure love
I
that
know.
I can I mean, you can't explain it
Oh,
unless you go through it, I think.
right.
But, and then the end, the saying goodbye, like you talk about with your mom. This is somebody I'm guessing you loved and was your world, right? So it's the two
We're close.
parallels of celebrating the gift of birth and being here and going through our lives, and then dying. And we don't, as a culture, unless you're Irish like you and I are, really
Oh,
celebrate.
yes, of course you are.
Of course, I'm Irish.
Yeah, you have,
Celebrate what happens when we leave this planet, because we miss them so much. But what I love about you, Nancy, is that you're putting this book out again and you're talking about these things. And like, grief is I talk about it all the time. It is a lifelong process.
yes, you don't go past it. You can go through it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I often say is, listen, because someone dies, it doesn't mean the relationship is over. It is changed, just as you are changed by your grief. And if you keep Julie's stories alive in the world, and you begin to lose the image of how the horrible way she died, with some of the amazing, I'm sure she was funny if you guys were besties, that those stories will be like just just a little caring, a little love, a little warmth that bring her back and keep her alive in the world. I think she's like, my mother's just over my shoulder. I really believe that. I think the world, it's William Butler Yeats. I always quote this,
No,
says,
I say this all the time.
the world between the living and the
Yeah.
dead is a very fine scrim. I'm also half Wasp and half Irish, so that I always think maybe that qualifies me as bipolar.
Oh
But
my God. So
but
funny.
but I am it just is so important to name Julie, name, and your little sister who was, I mean, you were tiny kids, but she still occupied this little space on the planet for, I mean, it just beyond me.
She passed at 9 months and I was 2. And then my
Oh,
dad,
you were too. Oh my
I
God.
was 2. My
I'm
sister
sorry.
was 9 months. But you know what's interesting? And I think I've talked about this on the podcast, because I talk about Julie every other episode. She's
That's so
always here.
great. She's
And
here.
well, I say that, and you're going to laugh when I tell you this, because I've told this story probably numerous times in the past 5.5 years, but because she's a monarch butterfly to me, anytime I see them, oh,
Of
hi,
course.
Julie. And I start talking to her like a complete crazy person. I will talk to the butterflies when I see them, because I know it's not like I think she's here. I know she's here.
Oh,
I've had
yes.
so many insane things happen to me.
And see,
Because
they're not insane. That's my belief. So many signs that you've gotten, and every time I sign a book or meet
yeah.
someone, I hear a story just like that, just like that. I mean, with my mother, I've had red-tailed hawks. I've had all kinds of things. Friend of mine, it just goes on and on and
What
on.
is your sign? I mean, I was going to wait till the end, but I need to know what your sign is for your best friend.
Well, this woman, for Elaine, it's a butterfly because there's a chapter in my book. I think what we need to say is everybody needs to get this book, In Lieu of Flowers, A
Yes.
Conversation for the Living, because there's a whole chapter about Elaine, and butterflies came around. I mean, in that part of Connecticut in the fall, they're on a migratory path. But the hospice nurse, Kathy, who helped me so much with my mother's dying, said, oh, I started to talk to her about butterflies. She said, are you kidding me? She said, my mother every time we'd go to the beach, my kids would say, Mom, there are butterflies all around you. When I went for a walk in the woods, there's a certain butterfly on the East Coast called a mourning cloak, mourning cloak. And it's this black butterfly with these blue, pale blue, like blue sky spots on it. And I was walking in the woods with the dog, and suddenly I had maybe seen one of those butterflies. I was surrounded by them. And I said, Oh, there's Elaine. There's Elaine. And what I told my editor, who unfortunately died at 68, cancer of unknown origin, Dan Frank, who was my real champion on this book originally. Brilliant, wonderful editor, and just the gentlest, sweetest man, and smart as hell. But he said, just, you know what you do? Just tell your stories. And then I was telling my stories, telling my stories. Okay, I've got this contract. This is great. First time, really, I was trusting my voice. This was I've done so many interviews. It's all about you. So actor, somebody else's line. Documentary films, somebody else's story. So I finally felt brave enough to do that. And then I went, oh God, now I have the contract. What do I do? And he said, just tell your stories. But then I got to the point where everyone's telling me these stories about hummingbirds and seagulls and wolves and red-tailed hawks and any kind of a feathered creature you can imagine. And I said, God damn, I've gotten to this. I'm going to have to number these. I can't leave them out. And also stories of spirits appearing. I mean, I knew this guy, young actor, who was kind of quiet, and his name was John Hamm. It is John Hamm. And so I've known John since he was a kid. And he told me the story of his mother. It's in the book of his mother had died, and he was going off to University of Texas, and he woke up 2 days before he was supposed to go, and there at the end of the bed was, he said, it was almost like she was Glinda the Good Witch, this his mother basically telling him with language or with whatever that he was going to be okay and things would be great. If I had, an apple for every story I've heard like that, I would have an orchard that reached from Maine to New York. It really is stunning. And so I have been the recipient and so fortunate and I don't mean to sound treacly, it really is wow that people, trust me, which they do, like they do you. There's something about our openness. Everybody tells you should be a therapist. I know they do. And then they tell your story. And then what happened to me on the bus or the end of the subway line, somebody will say, I cannot believe I just told you my entire story. And I thought, I can. It's okay. I mean, I didn't say it.
It's a responsibility too. Like you talked about in the beginning, as being an empath, being empathetic to loss. When you go through loss, I think as a young kid, you do become more empathetic.
Yes.
So it's a responsibility too.
It's, I think as I've gotten older and I now feel that these gifts have come in to my life through other people. And I always say it's like a stamp on my mourner's passport that people have shared these stories. And so it's like the AIDS quilt, you just have a collection of these stories that gets larger and larger and deeper and wider and more colorful. And, some stories are just almost too much to bear, like your sister dying at 9 months and you witnessing it too. But it really has shaped your life and it's shaped your work. And you're doing work that most people would be afraid to do. And you're funny. You're a rascal. So it's not just all lugubrious and sad and terrible. You have a responsibility, but you honor the responsibility. And it's your contribution to this culture, which is a big one. And I was listening to your friend from South Africa. I'm going to go, of course, we're going to go off on these
it's okay.
sideburns.
This is probably everyone going to be a 5-hour podcast. No, but Nancy, before you tell me that, I do have a question.
Okay.
Are you spiritual?
Oh, well, the very first page of my book, I say, my friends say it, that I'm not religious, but I am spiritual. And I go, well, if we're all so spiritual, why can't we talk about grief and death? And I always say I'm an Episcopalian. My mom was a lapsed Catholic. I grew up as an Episcopalian. I am probably one of the most spiritual people you've ever met. But I think that my my belief system has to do with the goodness of people, or it has to do with that bird flying in. I mean, and the beauty of nature. There's so many things. As long as they're not doctrinaire, I mean, if you listen to Joseph Campbell, or read some of his stories, and
Uh-huh.
Viktor Frankl, or, Atul Gawande, beautiful writers. I mean, I've read so many people who are not necessarily religious leaders, but they have such deep spirituality. So I think that, unfortunately, because churches have become more doctrinaire, and what happened with the Catholic Church, and it happened in Ireland, happened in Boston, happened, and that's why my mother left the church, honestly. And they've got to do a lot of repairing, and
Yeah,
they
I'm actually I the reason I asked that, I am Catholic. I'm by birth, I'm Irish Catholic. I'm spiritual more so than anything else. And the reason I asked about the spirituality is because when you go through so much loss and you talk about grief in life, I've interviewed people before that, like a hospice nurse that I had on pretty recently that I love, Penny. And
oh, I
they,
follow Penny.
oh, I
She's
love
great.
Penny.
I follow
Penny's
her
the best.
online.
Yeah.
She's so down to earth and
Oh,
wonderful.
she's the best.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
but her Instagram's Nurse Penny, everyone, if you want to
Yeah,
follow her.
she's really
Um,
good.
but there's people that say, I've seen all of this loss, I go through it and I'm not spiritual. And for me, I just feel like I can't imagine not thinking that I'm going to be with the people when I'm gone. And in the beginning, I kind of told you I lost. So my best friend's dad was like my second dad, and he passed away in October,
Wow.
tragically. And I had he and Julie's mom on, Donna, the month before he passed away.
Did he die suddenly?
Yeah, and I'll tell you, yeah,
Okay.
he did. And it was
I'm
very
so glad you had them before he died.
a month before, okay? And the reason I'm telling you this is because of what we're talking about, the signs, all this stuff. And he was a hoot. He and I would just he was like my second dad. We would just tease each other like nobody's business and laugh and laugh. And Julie and I laughed until we cried. Her sisters are like my family, her mom's like my family. And I asked him in the interview, and listeners, you can go back and listen to the episode with Bruce and Donna. Um, I said, do you have signs that you're going to see her again? And because
Oh,
the amount of pain that they went through as
oh,
parents without Julie. And he said, I don't know what exactly I believe. He said he was Catholic and believed in God and all of this stuff. But he said, one day I was, I was, we got all these balloons and he let the balloons out, and one balloon went one direction and all the other balloons went
wow.
the other direction. And that's how he knew. And then his other sign was that anytime he saw a cardinal, he knew it was Julie.
Yep.
And so I had to say that to you because I think the spiritual component looks different for everyone. I mean, I have guests on that are Buddhist. I have people on
Exactly.
that are
I
Jewish. Everybody thinks differently, but the common denominator is you don't necessarily have to, well, I mean, be in an organized religion. You can just be spiritual. You can think something. But all I know is that for me personally, I know that I am going to see them again.
Oh,
And
I agree. My mother couldn't talk, and on her deathbed, and
yeah,
Penny talks about this all the time. And the
yeah,
hospice nurses were just, I called them end of life midwives. They were so lovely, all women virtually. And my mother couldn't talk, and she woke from this sleep, and she pointed up to this, just over her head, and she said, "See, faces, faces." I said, "Well, it must be Dad, Mom. Must be your mother." And she was so happy. And if you have that, I mean, if you're not shot out of a tower, a plane or
yeah,
something,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm sure that there are, but if you're able, it's such a luxury and a blessing to be able to bear witness to someone who's dying. It's a sacred event, as sacred as birth. And that is spiritual, but our problem is the English language is so limited that we either say, oh, we're spiritual or we're religious or we're Catholic or we're Buddhist or whatever. I'm some
Yeah.
kind of mix. If you put all those in a blender, you'll get some of me, because I can't ever go into a Catholic church without lighting a candle from my mother and, my friends. And I think that it's unfortunate that we have to label things. For a while, when Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on
Oh
Death
my
and Divinity.
God. Do you know that that's my favorite book, The Wheel of
Well,
Life?
of course it is.
Yeah.
But I will tell you that people, because you're more open-minded and easier going, some
Hmm.
people would get this and they'd say, this is what has to happen. I have to go through denial, anger, whatever, and the 5 stages. Sometimes the 5 stages do not come logically. Sometimes they don't come for 2 years. Sometimes they all come at once. We all, just like we all grieve differently, we all breathe differently. We're all like snowflakes. None of us are quite alike, and yet we have similarities.
Yeah.
We are we're all spiritual creatures, spirit creatures, whatever you want to call us. And that's why all this craziness that's happening now makes me wonder, is this some kind of a total tearing down, like a ritual burning, literally, and we're gonna emerge phoenix like from the ashes from all this bad news stuff? And I'm telling you, the Epstein files. I was talking to Katie Kirk the other day, and I said, if you ever saw Laramie Project, which was a beautiful story done by a writer and different actors around the
Yeah, I
country.
remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
he
remember
was
that.
killed. He was a young gay man killed,
Yeah.
hung fence post. I
Hmm.
said, I want to do that. And I really have been talking about this. And I want to find, as soon as I kept stopped working on this book, I think that the Epstein project is really important, because there's some women, and everybody can represent a woman. You don't have to say her name. You say what happens. And you hear people telling the stories, and you're in a room with four walls, and the actors are lit and the background is black, and they're telling these young women's stories, and some young men's stories who have been horrifically abused, horrifically. And you are bearing witness to this. If you are a human being, as some of these senators who are coming out of the chambers, having looked at what's in the
Yeah.
Epstein files,
Yeah.
are just they're shaken. I
I
mean,
know.
Adam Schiff the other day was just almost in tears. It just, so something's going on. These tectonic plates that are shifting. I don't know if we're going to blow ourselves off the map. Um,
I'm trying not to think that
I don't think
because
so, but you don't
but
know.
I'm trying, I'm giving, I mean, when it's over, it's over. I mean, like
Yeah.
you said, we're all mortal. We're all going to go
Yep.
sometime. I'm trying to not think that way, just having young kids and,
Yeah, of
and I
course.
someday want to be a grandma and I want to be here and all the things that we go through in life, but we never know when our time is up, as we know. And I think that, like I said, the pendulum is I believe swinging the opposite direction, and I can't I can't think that this isn't just all going to end. And I really truly believe that 5 years from now, this will all be the wrong side of history. And
Oh,
the thing that breaks my
it
heart
take
more
longer.
than anything else is the fact that our news organizations are brainwashing, like they're not being honest with what's happening. So people in other countries, for example, I hope that they know that, there's what is the statistic on who supports this administration? I think it's less than 30% at this point. And there's so many people, good people that just want to see other people succeed
Yeah.
and do well and have a life. And me personally, I don't care what color, what sex you are, who you are. I want I want diversity in my country, and I was always proud of that my entire life. And it's almost like we have been robbed of who our identity. And I think that that's, like I said in the beginning, a real form of grief. But like,
We've
as you
there.
know,
Yeah,
I just personally believe that this is going to end, and I have to believe that it's going to end where the good goes to the top. That's what I mean, the bad guys never win, right? In every
right.
movie, in
It's going
every
to
show,
take
in every book.
whatever is happening now. It's going to take a while, but as people begin to speak up, I mean, if you look at the Minnesotans who just stood up,
Mhm.
and they are an example of grace and goodwill, and the two people murdered and senselessly, that they are examples, they're universal examples of how good people can be. In San Diego, I know there are people helping other people in ways that it's like the Underground Railroad. I mean, what's happening is people are getting together again and realizing how dire it is. And when it gets dire enough, you and I go back to September 11th. There was a period of real connection among people of all ages. And or I travel a lot, and so I'd be in a country and they'd say, "How are you doing? You live in New York? How are people doing? We were so," and then you get into a conversation. So then that odd way grief opens you up, and that's what's happening now. Even though it's horrible, we're grieving. We're all in a kind of, there's a low hum of grief, even though we're not, in the middle of a divorce right now or a friend dying, but the grief is inescapable. And so what
That's
we
why
need,
I think your book is so needed right now. I mean,
well,
I
thank you.
truly think I
I think
truly
that's
can't
why
tell.
Random House did it. I would listen. I did not expect to have a 25th anniversary edition of this. And Katie Couric wrote this amazing review on Instagram, and it just blew me away. It was so touching. And then we started talking, and here I am. I have a new intro, a new afterword, and I am a grandmother. And I moved out here during COVID for my daughter's second baby shower. It turned out to be March 11th, 2020, which yesterday was 6 years ago. I landed. Fortunately, they'd moved in a house with an extra bedroom and bath so I could stay. But there were too many Trump flags flying in Orange County, so I had to move to San Diego.
I hear
I
you. I
said,
mean, God, I
what are
love
those flags up there? And
I
I said,
know. I
there's a bear
know.
flag. And they'd go, those are Trump flags. And I said, I'm sorry, I just can't live here. I'm sorry.
I know,
I'm a New
but here's
Yorker.
the thing. I think more and more people, if they would turn off Fox News or OAN or whatever they're watching, will
Oh,
understand
good luck.
nobody wanted war. Nobody wants, I mean, I don't understand if they do. They're being lied to. What I will tell you is the book is needed. Listeners, go get the book. Tell people the biggest, for the sake of time, what is the biggest takeaway that you can tell my listeners about your book and why it's important, something that they can take away from it?
Well, first of all, I'd like them to get the book. I'd like also, I never ask people to review the book, but if you can, if you go to your local bookstore, I've also done an audiobook, and it was very moving for me because I relived my mother's death, my father's death, Elaine's death. And the biggest takeaway is to pay attention, closer attention to the world around us, to see if somebody is hurting, to pay attention, to reach your hand out, to not be afraid to talk about things that are hard to talk about because we're all living with them. And I think I've just read three things about people, women in China, and a woman here who was completely engaged with AI because she couldn't find anybody to talk to.
Mm.
And there was nobody that was really empathic and nobody who was kind. And so the AI has figured out how to do this. Now we're living with AI, but we're living with I mean, there's something sort of well, certainly unrealistic about falling in love with a voice and recorded material that's been, woven into the
AI is a totally
sound.
scary thing. I mean, I've done
It's scary
episodes
to
about it.
help with medicine, but we're in it.
We're
This
in
is
it.
the
Yeah.
Wild West, and that's happening along with everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
But what I would suggest is to keep your head out of the screen for a while, to really do, whatever is meditative for you. Take walks, be in nature, be engaged with other human beings, because it's a short run. This is not a rehearsal, as you and I both know, and you've heard that a million times, and so have I. But really, it's not. I am just shocked. I met a woman the other night whose daughter was killed in near Manhattan, Venice, I think, by a guy who was driving wildly in his car.
Oh my God. She was on my podcast. Oh, wait, no.
Okay,
It was
anyway.
her baby in Venice, but she was pushing the stroller. It was
Oh, no,
the kid wasn't killed. No, the kid wasn't killed.
Well,
Okay.
this woman's daughter, who's 35, was instantly killed. And so,
Oh God.
and she is quite amazing. She is, some days it's impossible. Some days I say, you don't get out of bed. If you need to howl, go in the backyard and howl at the moon, do it. There's no right or wrong way to do this. And it continues. We carry the grief with us. It's like a backpack that sometimes gets a little lighter as time goes by. But we all have to carry it. And if we can help each other with that carriage, if you will, with that burden, it becomes less of one. And it's like my friend's son who was killed, murdered. She said she went back to the office after 6 weeks and people would be ducking into their offices afraid to talk to her. That still goes on. And it's people are real chickens. And it's really, it has to do with them being afraid of, I think, their own mortality. It's not about saying the right thing. I think the less they have come to grips with that, we're born and we die. We don't pass in and pass away. We are born and we die. And those are the two halves of the walnut. And that's the way it is. And how we got here is miraculous. I was thinking the other day, the San Diego Zoo had a baby giraffe, fortunately, and I was just in Serengeti a year ago. And, when you see a giraffe or you see a zebra or you see an elephant and then you see a group of them and the elephants are mourning something, the kind of thing is just miraculous. So that is, to me, kind of creature comforts, paying attention to what may seem odd, talking to your friends about it, laughing. Humor it's okay to laugh, even though you're feeling terrible, if something's funny. So
yeah,
I'm not sure that's there's one takeaway, but my takeaway is pay attention, talk, be engaged with people,
and be around other people. I love what you say about the backpack too, because I've said something very similar before. So that's weird. Maybe in a past life,
I think you and I, we have to get in some serious trouble together.
We will. Don't worry.
I know.
Guess who's going to San Diego?
I've got a guest room for you.
But in closing, I can't tell you how lucky I am to do what I do, to do this podcast. And I posted something the other day. I met this lady named Onika Mays, and she was on a couple episodes ago. And I honestly was struggling over the past, I would say since the holidays, going, do I really want to keep doing this podcast? And I've talked about it. I talked about it on that episode. And Onika was like, well, you're supposed to keep doing it. And this is what you're supposed to do. And she's just this amazing, amazing lady. And I think about her and I think about you and just meeting you and talking to you for an hour and going,
and a pleasure.
And going, oh my God, this is the most amazing woman. And I'm so grateful to you for what you're putting out.
To you for what you're doing.
Yeah. So in closing, I think listeners, if you're struggling right now, like we are, right? Because we're all struggling and you're in a different part of the world and you're wondering what in God's name is going on with you in the United States. We're all not that. We love our neighbors in Canada. We love our neighbors. I mean, if you're listening, I have listeners in Japan. I have listeners all over the world. And let me just tell you how much you mean to me. And if you are struggling with your mental health or you're struggling with grief, like we've talked about today, or you're just feeling lonely, get out, go outside, go talk to somebody. Today I went, which is weird that you bring this up. I was on a walk with my friend Elaine this morning. So talk about signs.
Yeah.
So look out for the signs. Look out if you're dealing with grief right now. They're here. They're with you. I like to say they're just in the next room.
That's what my mother said. She said, I think dying, you just go into the next room. The Dalai Lama said, you're just taking off your clothes and putting on a new set.
Yeah. And they're waiting. And they're waiting.
Oh, they're waiting. They're waiting. Listen, if you listen to Nurse Penny, the hospice nurse,
Oh,
is,
I
she
love
talks
her.
about it all the time, and
Yeah.
I love that she's gone on and she's really gotten a following, because
Mhm.
they all have that wisdom, and it's, and I become such a believer in this spiritual creature comforts that happen after a person dies. There's no doubt in my mind. It's anecdotal. I mean, I can't tell you anything, except I've heard so many stories that I had to finally number them in the book because I didn't know what else to do. I had to tell everybody's story.
I can't wait to read it. It's called In Lieu of Flowers, Conversations with the Living. Look,
Conversation for the living.
See, you knew I was going to mess that
I
up.
did, and I was waiting to
You were
catch,
waiting
but
for
I
me
got
to-
you so busted.
Nancy, you were waiting for me to fall, and we all knew it was going to happen, but it didn't happen until the end of the episode. Everyone, thank you so much for listening. Leave me a quick review if you have time. Keep going. You matter. Your story matters. Thanks, Nancy.
Thanks, Megan.
Judging Meghan with Meghan Judge.